While we were sitting here last week, they're shooting and killing people as if we are target practice. And we are watching the FBI ignore the evidence of domestic terrorism, calling them hate crimes, pushing them off to the states, and they're not investigated. Now, you know what happened in El Paso was racially motivated. Do you not know that? And so was Dayton, and they won't talk about it. So that is why we have this panel here with us today, to talk about it. And guess what? Because of your contributions, call us at 773-256-2775. Because of your contributions, we are free enough to talk about it. Okay? No one has got a lock on our jaw. No one has put some bars around our minds. We can give you the information. There's some people who investigate this every single day. So I want you to hold your applause until I've introduced the whole panel, because we want to talk today about the rise of white nationalism. You know, people feel they can say anything to you, and now they feel they can do anything to you. We're talking about that today, amen? Now you can put your hands together for that. Oh my, I've lived long enough to need my reading glasses. How about that? Oh, I'm glad about it. This is what this looks like. How about that? Amen. Come on, ladies. Give it up. We want to thank Dr. Harold Pollack from the University of Chicago. He researches crime and mental health in the city of Chicago. He's a Helen Ross professor at the University of Chicago. Attorney Andrew Kang from Asian Americans Advancing Justice in Chicago. Dr. Tom Mockaitis, DePaul University. He has a book that I want everyone to get. Violent Extremists Under the Domestic and International Terrorist Threat. We need to talk about this today. And of course, do we have Reverend Attorney Janette Wilson? All right, put your hands together for this panel. Put your hands together, everybody. So, let us begin by, I'd like to do a round robin. And first, let's talk about let's come up with a definition for domestic terrorism, because some people are pushing back on that. I was noticing in social media that, you know, you have these tours of plantations where you had people who were enslaved, black people, and you have a lot of white people who've been complaining about these tours because they say, you're making me feel bad. Why are you talking about this? Why are you, well, no, but, okay. I don't know how else you can describe slavery. It's awful. But what we have to first do, I think, is have a working definition. So, you, Dr. Mockaitis, you, Attorney Kang, and then you, Dr. Pollack, and then you, Reverend Attorney Janette Wilson, I'd like for you to give me a succinct definition of domestic terrorism.
Well, terrorism is, by its very nature, ideologically driven. If you look at Dayton, there's no clear indication that that's there. There's no denying that El Paso was ideologically motivated violence targeting a group of individuals. And absolutely right, people on the right will try to deflect that and say, oh, he was just an individual, et cetera. No, there is a pervasive ideological movement of white supremacy that is behind this violence.
Attorney Kang?
Yeah, so first of all, I would like to thank the Rainbow Push Coalition for holding this event. It's really important that we have these conversations, not just in isolation, but by coming together, right? Different communities of color coming together, having this conversation about the threat that we're facing. But when I think of domestic terrorism, and this is not a legal term of the perspective I'm about to share, I think about what happened after the emancipation and during Reconstruction in the South, and what happened to the black community, right? Growth in political rights, right? You had African Americans getting elected to Congress, right? And what was the reaction? It was the KKK, right? It was a concerted effort, extra legal, right? It was illegal even under those laws, to suppress people from voting, right? And to force the minority community back into a reduced political position, right? And it was extremely effective, right? And unfortunately, the federal troops went home, and at that point, it got even worse, right? And a lot of that, whether it was Jim Crow or what happened afterwards, stems from those moments. And so when I think of domestic terrorism, I think of a concerted effort to really terrorize a specific community or set of communities to take away their political power, right? And so that's what we're talking about. That's what we're going to be talking about, how we combat. And thank you for having me here today.
Dr. Pollack? Yes. Oh, you can give him some love. Some
I certainly agree with your previous comments that you've made. I would say a systematic effort to intimidate people and terrify people so that they can't exercise their full rights as Americans. And I would say, I do a lot of work with people who have mental health challenges of various sorts, and we often think of an atrocity such as what happened in El Paso or Dayton as a mental health, in the context of mental health. If you read the manifesto that the young man who committed the homicides in El Paso produced, it's actually a fairly lucid document that was trying to intimidate people and use violence on behalf of a political agenda to deny people their full rights in our communities. And the people that I deal with who have mental health challenges are not actually a public safety threat in the same way and don't seek to intimidate other people. And it's very important that we keep those concepts very separate, because those of us that we live with who have mental health challenges should not be stigmatized by being grouped in with people who are trying to hurt other people in that way.
Well, Dr. Pollack, in fact, before I moved to you, Reverend Attorney Janette Wilson, I had Dr. Damon Arnold on my radio show yesterday. And Dr. Damon Arnold, we all know, former director of the Illinois Department of Public Health, along with other mental health professionals and really physicians and people who take care of our physical health. They have debunked the narrative that the president, and not just this president, everybody tries to drive the narrative that only people who are mentally ill do this. Number one, it stigmatizes the mentally ill. It makes them more vulnerable. When you see someone who's struggling on the streets, you kick them, you spit on them, you mistreat them. And it's just not true. These people are lucid. They know exactly what they're doing. They're just mean-spirited. Reverend Dr. Janette Wilson?
So domestic terrorism is when an individual who lives in the same country, city, state, county of one race decides to intimidate and terrorize others who live in that same city, county, state, country. And they use means of force to scare, to oftentimes to murder. It is when one individual or a group of individuals decide that this other group of individuals have no value as humans and that they have the right to control them, to take them out. It is the same kind of mentality that Hitler used in Nazi Germany. It is the same kind of mindset that placed Africans in slave camps and on plantations. It's the same kind of mindset that, as previously stated, the Ku Klux Klan put on sheets at night and placed fire bombs and crosses in front of homes of African Americans, or hung them on trees outside of churches. There is no law that will convict someone of domestic terrorism in the same way that we have laws, and Andy knows this, where we convict others international terrorism. And that's something that we need to push our Congress to do. We need to push our state legislators to pass domestic terrorism laws. This is designed to what happened, Santita, as you're aware, what happened in Mississippi this week. You go into a plant and arrest people that you presume to be aliens or immigrants, non-citizens, and you decide, ICE, not by acting under color of law, acting as if the law gave them the authority to seize people and take them into custody. This is a very dangerous moment. But I do think it's not a mental health, it's a spiritual health crisis.
Absolutely.
In this country.
Yeah.
We have no sense of God, and we have no sense of humanity.
Well, you know, amen. I'm going to move this around because what is also interesting about what happened in Mississippi is that at the same time, these 680 workers, they were also pushing for workers' rights at their jobs. It's very important for us to look at that as well because there is a tie between that kind of intimidation and them pushing for their rights on their jobs, and then they're raided by ICE in front of their children. It reminds me of the chain gangs that black children used to have to see with their fathers and mothers in the South during my parents' childhood. So let me get to El Paso and Dayton, and I keep bringing up Dayton because there's a lot of controversy about Dayton, for example. In El Paso, this young man Crucius went after Mexican Americans and just anyone who looked Mexican. But in Dayton, that was a black crowd. And this was a white guy who was alleged to have been upset about the fact that his sister, who he killed, was dating a black man. And you get a lot of confusion about who Mr. is it Bettis or Betts was, because his social media identity really made him look like he was a leftist. But the fact is, they wiped his social media as soon as they put it up, so we don't know what that was about. But we do know that something doesn't pass the smell test. And we can call, because we have been on the receiving end of it, because, you know, black people, as we look at people of color, and that's important for us to do, we have to really deal with anti-black racism too. Because there is a real push against us, but then, because we're watching our Mexican and our Latinx brothers and sisters who are shocked that this is happening to them. We're watching our Asian brothers and sisters who are shocked that this is happening to them. Our Jewish brothers and sisters who are shocked that this is happening again. That, you know, that it never stopped. Please help me.
Yeah,
what are we looking at?
The conclusion I drew in the thing I just published is,
and the name of your book
is Violent Extremists, is bigots are equal opportunity haters. They may target a specific group. In this case, Hispanic Americans. But believe me, and I've dug into their websites and their Facebook pages, it's like wading through a sewer, but if you dig down there, they hate everybody who isn't like them. And that's what is so evil and pernicious about this. And it isn't about left and right. It's about, you mentioned, I was in Germany just last October, and the comparisons with 1933 are so striking. You find whatever scapegoat, whoever doesn't look like you, and you take whatever's wrong in your life and you just heap it on that group.
Dr. Mockaitis,
and no wonder there's violence.
But what happened in Germany? Because I think we don't know, we're too far away from that.
Yeah.
And for this little baby right here, and these young people who don't know what happened in Germany which led to the extinction of 6 million people.
Well, the thing is, exactly what's disturbing is you read that manifesto, and I agree with you, there's a lucidity to it of the man in El Paso. And he's angry about everything. And then all it takes is a leader to kind of point in that direction and say, you know, this is your enemy. You know, just if we deal with them, your life will be so much better. And of course, it's a lie. I mean, the same people that are committing these acts are also themselves exploited. But, and what's really deadly today is how much the language of racism has been reinvented to sound polite. Like, it's the same ugliness wrapped in a nice package. Oh, we're not racist. We just celebrate European heritage. You know, we're not misogynists. We just think it's better when men and women have traditional roles. You dig into it, it's the same nasty ugliness that has been around forever. It's just been made to sound more acceptable. And when leadership validates it and moves it into the mainstream, you have a really toxic mix. And we're going to have more of this. I hate to say it.
The other thing I would add is the availability of powerful weapons, and especially the availability of powerful weapons to young men who are seeing these currents that are in the society. And they're so young, they're at the peak ages where all sorts of issues are at the highest risk, 21, 22, 23 years old, 18 years old in some cases, and you can get a semi-automatic rifle with high capacity ammunition storage and magazines with too little oversight. You know, every society has people who are troubled, people who are going to pick up on those themes that are very toxic in the society, but not every society has such a poor level of supervision over weapons of mass killing. In Dayton, he was actually killed by police within about 30 seconds and still killed, I believe, 9 people. And
why do you think that this man who killed more than 20 people and shot more than 25 people, why was Mr. Crusius taken in peacefully? I mean, this is someone, we know that he was killing people. They caught him like this. How is it somebody, I'm opening that up to the panel, because help me.
I think, well, I think that...
The other attorney jumping on that too.
Go ahead, Andy.
Well, you know, I would say this. I think we're all really, for many of us who have had interactions with the police, know that you know, bias plays a huge factor here, right? That if these shooters had been of a different race, right, there would be a much different outcome when the police engage them, right? But if I may, I did want to loop back to something Reverend Wilson said and that was mentioned before about sin and about this being a spiritual issue. Now, I'm a Christian, so I'll speak in my terms, but you know, one of the things I'm always aware of is when Hitler and his circle in Germany wanted to study how to create their system of racist laws, guess where they went? They came here and they studied our laws. Our laws around slavery, our laws around who could vote, who couldn't vote, our laws about how we treated our Native American brothers and sisters, the laws about how the Asian community was dealt with, right? When Chinese labor was brought here to build a railroad, great, but then they stayed, and a lot of folks weren't happy about that and felt threatened. And so what did they do? They ended up passing the Chinese Exclusion Act so that no more Chinese could come here. Right? In fact, one of the biggest lynchings to ever occur on the Pacific Coast was involving a group of Chinese men that were...
Go into that a little bit more, because I don't want it to be lost on the television audience or the audience in this room that this is the Rainbow Push Coalition.
Absolutely.
And we have a rainbow here. Don't think that there are people of every background who are not concerned about the rise of white nationalism.
Absolutely.
Let us give our panel a round of applause.
Yeah.
That's right.
So I was just going to end in saying, you know, we've seen this before. Our Japanese community members, you know, they've seen this before, right? They're very alarmed by what we're seeing. But to the larger point, you know, I know we're talking about these horrific incidents, and there was one, I believe, before even El Paso. There was one at the Garlic Fest in California that also targeted immigrants. Unfortunately, what makes this so relevant now isn't just to talk about gun control, isn't just to talk about these troubled individuals, or even just about white nationalism. It's about the fact that our leader of our country is giving cover and legitimacy to these views. And that has to stop, you know.
And I think, I would just add, what disturbs me also in the current environment, I don't believe that President Trump is, you know, I would not draw a comparison to Hitler or extreme cases like this, but where I would draw a comparison is he is expressing racist sentiment and denigrating people on the basis of their background, and many, many people in the society are allowing him to cross some guardrails of decency that we haven't allowed other people in the past to cross. And he, you know, he is not an evil person, but he is a person who is expressing sentiments that we cannot have in the society accepted as legitimate, and it's up to us as a society to resist that and to defeat that, and to say, no, this is not acceptable. That I think the reaction of many decent people allowing people who are expressing unworthy sentiments and sometimes triggering people who might take it that next step, that's what I find most disturbing in the current political conversation.
I think
I agree with what you said. In some ways, what he's doing is more pernicious. He's an opportunist. He plays to the gallery. And if he's discovered in white nationalism, really let's call it what it is, it's white supremacy, it's not white nationalism, is that this appeals to his base really well. So what he believes is, I don't know his heart, but he's willing to use a dangerous rhetoric. I mean, the leader of the country is talking about an invasion, and a mass shooter uses the exact same word. There is what the Southern Poverty Law Institute calls motivational complicity. You have put a target on the back of innocent people with your language. Words can kill. And, words can pull the trigger, to use his own language.
Rabbi Sam Gordon wrote an article this week in the newspaper, The Meaning and the Impact of Words. And when you have the leader of what we consider to be the free world, using a language and pushing every button in audiences where take them out, send them back. Those are all code words, not only to his base, he is moving our focus away from some of the issues and some of the things that he is doing to ignore the rule of law, to disregard the law, the way the Constitution has set this nation on its foundation. He's eliminated all of that. If you look at the appointments, we have an entire country that is now run by acting people. We have no confirmed members of his cabinet. Those that were confirmed have all resigned, and so now you have him. It is very Hitler-like, and we need to not ignore the fact that he's following the playbook. If I may, our attention.
Well, Reverend Attorney, I don't want to cut you off. I just want to add to this so that we can continue to move the conversation along. Because in real time, Hitler wasn't Hitler, right? In real time, these people who've committed these heinous acts, it's only upon reflection that we see how awful their behaviors were. I too am very careful about giving people certain labels. That having been said, I think that what we need to do, I'd like to go down the panel and just jump in, because this is a conversation. What are we looking at then? Because this is a master marketer, our president is, and he is the president. And our president occupies not just an elected space, but a spiritual space. And that's why he has really decided to touch not a mental ill, but a sociological and spiritual illness in the country, right? And he has purposefully done that. So how do we acknowledge that? How do we combat that? Because many of us are really still trying to dance around the edges because we don't want to quite, and yet people are getting killed.
If I could just, so my organization, Asian Americans Advancing Justice, we fight for racial equity. So that doesn't mean just what's best for Asians, right? That means a society that's racially just and works for everybody, right? And when I think of my faith, or even the Judeo-Christian faith at large, I think of the term shalom, right? Peace, everyone living in harmony with each other, right? This president is trying to make sure that does not happen, right? Whether it's talking about jobs and trying to put the Black community against the Latino community, whether it's talking about affirmative action, trying to put the Asian community against the other communities of color, whether it's talking to Christians and trying to pit them against the LGBTQ community, right? Or Muslims. We have to reject that, right? We have to see what this is and say, no, we're not accepting that. We do not accept that from our leaders.
And we have to look at these detention centers, these holding places, the similarities in what happened with the Japanese, the internment camps. When we look at what happened in slavery, you have to show the parallels so that you can understand this is an insidious move by not just one man. It's a group that has decided to control a body of people. Right now at the southern border, people are not allowed to enter from the southern border. They are stopped in Mexico. And it's not just Latinos. It is Africans, it's Caribbeans, it's those who come from South America trying to seek asylum. So there are some moves that we are not even aware of. Meanwhile, appointments are being made to federal district courts. Changes are being made to state laws as the state rights move. And that's why we have to focus on our election in 2020 in a very specific way, not just on the one office, the White House, the presidency. We must look at the Senate that won't go back in session.
And you are the author of the forthcoming book, Violent Extremism.
It's already out, actually.
Okay, well, okay, because we want everyone
and the thing
to
is,
get your book.
Sure, how you fight this is, if I can use, again, I'm using religious language, the first way you to cast the demon out, you got to know its name. And you call out the language. Yeah. And
Legion.
You call out the language, you call out the racism in everybody's ways. I do it by writing and teaching, but everybody can do it. And there's something, and I applaud the voter drive and the comment you made. A long time ago in the civil rights movement, people would say, if you don't have a lot of dollars, you got to have a lot of numbers. You fight dollars with numbers. And this election is going to be won on voter turnout. And if the turnout is there, the numbers are there, but it's going to take a concerted effort, and be prepared for every dirty trick, every pushback, every voter suppression.
Go ahead.
And what you're doing is really the way forward, and we all have to participate.
And let me add one other thing to that. I certainly agree with the comment that it's so important to be out there, not just to be focused on the presidency, but I would say that people are in fear and they are in pain in a way that we have to address. People are in pain because the economy is leaving huge chunks of the country behind. Many of the people who are drawn to President Trump are not drawn to him because they are racist. They're drawn to him because they're hoping that he can offer them something that the political system has not offered. And you start driving south from this spot into many parts of Illinois, and you can see where people are in pain. And we have to show people. It was interesting. I was part of a big debate over the attempt to repeal the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, and many people who are actually drawn to President Trump in some ways are also saying, well, wait a minute, there's also people in our communities with disabilities, and we need Medicaid because we have to take care of each other. And we have to find ways to address that pain that is a positive message that goes with the calling out of the negative message. And I also think, and there's a certain human reality. I actually understand people are fearful because the society is changing. And that's actually really difficult for people. We are truly going to be a multiracial, multi-ethnic democracy in a different way. Yes. White people like myself are still going to certainly have a prominent place in America and a place of privilege. We will not be dominant, and we will not be a white country in the same way in our children's generation that we are in my parents' generation. People are afraid of that.
I'm sorry.
Oh, no worries, because I'm going to ask you.
But that's something to celebrate. And I get it. I come from that white working class background. And I think this, to me, gives me enormous hope, is deep down, the people who are spewing this hateful rhetoric know they're on the losing side of history. You could stop immigration right now, and by the middle of this century, there will be no majority culture. And if we could get through the message, and for example, to the very supporters who buy into this, look, you're exploited too. The farmers, the unemployed factory workers, et cetera, but you're being sold a bill of goods by being told, oh, you just don't like minorities and you can feel better about yourself.
But Dr. Mockaitis, let me ask you this.
Sure.
Why have white working class people been so resistant to that? Reverend Jackson ran for president on that. Dr. King campaigned on that. Black people throughout our history in this country, because America's never been a white country. Never.
But they've been told. They've been told that.
But if they just
somebody's taking your job.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, if you just went through the South,
and they believe it.
If you look around the room, we're evidence that America's never been a white country, and we're looking at evidence that in many places in the South, the reason you had the 3/5 rule is because you had so many black people. What we have now, empowered people. And at the same time, right, you just had the report where you saw 17 million people who were purged from the voter rolls between 2016 and 2018. But David Daley tells us that, oh, no, add 16 million to that, because 2 years before, from 2014 to 2016, 16 million more. So we have 33 million people. So how do we get through that noise? Because you're moving into the Dr. Mockaitis, Attorney Yang, Dr. Pollack, Reverend Attorney Wilson, you're talking about power,
Absolutely.
Dr. Mockaitis.
And power does not concede without struggle. If I've been in power, whether it's correct or incorrect, I'm not going to give up my place of privilege. I don't want to have my children compete for college on an equal footing. I will cheat. I will use a legacy. I'll do whatever I have to do to maintain that power. And now they are fearful because they know the jobs are not going to Mexico or to other places. They know for sure they're going to robots, if anywhere, and so they have to change the culture. They can't go back down in the mines. It's unsafe, and we're cutting our carbon footprint. So now I have to think differently, and I'm afraid. I am afraid, and so I'm going to lash out at those people who are not clear of their own power, their buying power, or their voting power. And I will see if I can kind of contain them and strike fear in the hearts of those who think they have perceived power.
I still want to know what the resistance is, because the violent extremist has a profile, right?
Yeah. Lyndon Johnson actually came up with it in the 1960s. Take the poorest white person, tell him he's better than the best off African American, and you'll get him to support you. The data, it's amazing, and I saw it's true in Europe too. The hatred is deepest where there's absolutely no interaction with anybody who looks different than you are. I could be angry at any one of you in the room, but I can't deny your humanity because you're 5 feet away from me. But the farthest I remove myself, I can tell myself terrible things about Muslims, about African Americans, about Asian Americans, about Hispanic Americans. My students at DePaul are a wonderful tapestry of the human creation, and they interact with each other in a daily basis without these difficulties. Any difficulties are usually brought in from the outside. So the more we can have opportunities to interact across these barriers. It's very interesting. We had a speaker at the university who's studying Fred Hampton and the Panthers, who was doing that way back in the 60s, taking people from the dirt poor South, white people, and saying, hey, you know what? You're getting the short end of the stick from this system just like we are. Why are we fighting? Why are we fighting? Well, we know what happened to him. So that's how we break it down too.
In fact, using that example, Mayor Daley Sr. and the Chicago police and the FBI, when they cracked down on the Black Panthers, it was because they were doing that. Because they were in Uptown, where my office is located, talking to poor Appalachian whites. They were talking to Asians. They were talking to Latinos, right? And that level of political organizing really, really scared them, right? But to get back to Reverend Wilson, part of political power is our story. Who controls history, right? And there's been a lot of talk about reparations with the presidential candidates, and I don't know how someone doesn't go to the National African American History Museum in Washington, D.C., and just spend a day there and think that reparations is a crazy idea, right? Am I right? But that history, that story, which is our story, not just the Black community story, that's our story as Americans.
Explain that. Why do you, because that's what I try to talk to people about all the time.
If you walk through that museum, one of the things you will learn, it's not just about slavery. One of the bedrocks of the founding of America, our economy, including the North, and our entire success as an American country, was based off the labor, the sweat of slaves, right?
And that's another area. As a historian, you've kind of pushed my button there, and that is that they're also in the right fighting the historical narrative very successfully. Texas no longer talks about the slave trade in their textbooks. It's the triangle trade. Yeah, sure, there was a triangle, but it was a horrific trafficking in human beings, and that has to be said. The state of Oklahoma will not pay for the AP history exam because it doesn't celebrate Manifest Destiny. So fighting the historical narrative, because what they're pushing is a mythological view of it. For me, even the eye-opener was to go to DuSable Museum. The history I was taught growing up was all the people running the Underground Railroad were these nice white Quakers and people like that. African Americans were written out of their own history. So, reclaiming, it's not just about reclaiming the present, it's about reclaiming the past and speaking truth to power with history.
It's interesting that when we think about the story of Freddie Hampton, and one of the things that makes me optimistic is actually when I talk to a lot of folks today in law enforcement who get that. Not that I should say that's a continuing project in a lot of ways. But one of the striking things about El Paso, heavily immigrant city, a lot of people who are unauthorized immigrants in El Paso, one of the safest places in the United States. And if I spend a lot of my time working on the underground gun market, working on ways that we can make Chicago safer from a public safety perspective. And the way that's going to happen is law enforcement in partnership with community and dealing with issues like the excessive availability of guns without proper oversight. And that's something where law enforcement and communities can partner. And part of what's going to make that partnership work is when law enforcement is ready to acknowledge that this history has occurred. And then people in community can acknowledge, hey, law enforcement actually has a pretty difficult challenge in a city like Chicago, and we have to work together and help each other. And there's just no other way, neither one of us going anywhere, and I think I'm optimistic when I hear those kinds of conversations happening, that often people are talking about the legacy of racism and so in a very explicit way.
If you could hold on one moment, I want to remind our audience that after we get off the air in about 3.5 minutes, we're going to continue to stream live on rainbowpush.org and on Facebook on the Reverend Jesse Jackson Senior page and on the Rainbow Push page. Because what I'd like to do, Reverend Dr. Todd Geary, I'd love for you to come step ahead and join us, because we're going to wrap this up for our television audience, but we're going to continue to stream. If you can give us another 15 minutes, because there is what we're not hearing in this conversation, and as you know, I'm in media, what we're not hearing you all. We're not hearing you, Attorney Yang, say that we all need to be in on this conversation, that this is our collective history, which is what you're saying, Dr. Mockaitis, Dr. Pollack. You're saying, wait a minute, people are not mentally ill who are doing this. They're sociologically ill, they're spiritually ill. Reverend Dr. Attorney, I can't believe I'm forgetting you, Janette Wilson, who I've known all my life, practically. That having been said, I want to remind people, just one moment, that I want you to go over to Facebook, where we will continue to stream this conversation for another 10, 15 minutes, because we want them to be able to wrap this up appropriately. And you know what? We can deliver this message to you right away. And we want you to join us on the Keep Hope Alive with Reverend Jesse Jackson radio show tomorrow. Get your iHeart app. Go to @PatriotAM1150, @PatriotAM1150, and at Real Talk 910. At Real Talk 910, we're going to have Michael German on, and hopefully one or two of these gentlemen to talk about this tomorrow, so that we can continue to talk about the rise of white nationalism. Because you know what, everybody? It's something that we feel. Many of us, when we walk out of this room, are going to say, Reverend Attorney Wilson, you know what? People say anything to you now. Now they'll do anything to you now, and you know what? Before we had the guns, we just had the rope. So I think guns are an issue for sure.
We have to remove the guns, because these assault weapons are too powerful to survive.
Well, why do you think we still hold on to them? We've got 30 seconds, Attorney Wilson.
We have them, and we need to get rid of them. We must ban assault weapons, because it's an easy gun to use. You don't have to know how to shoot. You have so many rounds, you're bound to hit a target. The problem,
Reverend Wilson, I got 20 seconds. Why do we want weapons of war in our homes? 20 seconds.
People are afraid, and they feel like they're going to protect themselves. And some people believe that the more ammunition they have, the safer they are. It's a lie. And so we have to say to people, you can be safe. It's not with a gun.
And you know what we want you to do? We want you to call Mitch McConnell's office and your congressmen in both houses of Congress. We want you to call them right now and let them know we want them back in Washington to do a vote on this, because we want these weapons of war off of our streets. Please go to rainbowpush.org. We are streaming live there. Please call us at 773-256-2775. We need your support. Please send your prayers out to Reverend Jesse Jackson as he walks the line at the Bud Billiken Parade, and Jonathan Jackson. And we want you to call us throughout the week at 773-FREEDOM. And check me out. Don't you go, Reverend Wilson, because the more the merrier here. WCPT820.com, 6 to 8 a.m. Central Standard Time, the Santita Jackson Show, Progressive Talk. God bless you. Keep hope alive. Rainbow Push. Stay right there, everybody. Reverend Wilson, are you now on your way to the Bud Billiken Parade? Oh, okay. Give her some love, everybody. But I wanted to keep you all up here because what we've got, we're not only on the Impact Network, we are also, and we're not only on the radio, we're on Facebook Live right now. And so I want to be able to wrap this up appropriately with our audience who are still watching and who can watch us throughout the week. Because we want people to get your book that's out, pardon me, Violent Extremist, because you're studying this every day. And I wanted to ask you, and I want to ask you right now, and please welcome Reverend Dr. Todd Yeary, our Vice President, Douglas Community Church out of Baltimore. Great things come out of Baltimore. We know that. I want to know from you, why would you write a book about violent extremists, and particularly now? What is your interest in that?
You know, it comes out of my media work, quite honestly. I've done a lot of commentary since 9/11, and to me, fear is the most debilitating emotion people can feel. That's what terror is about. And I saw just an incredibly powerful need to explain, not to lecture about politics, and to try to take irrational fear and say, hey, you know what? Let's dampen it down. She left before I could thank her for making that remark. Yeah, if I can frighten you, I can make you do all kinds of bad things. So I try to explain it and get it down to a level saying, let's take a breath, step back, and look at where the real danger is and what we can do about it. That's what really motivates me.
How can we get your book?
It's available on Amazon. It's probably the best way to get it.
The name of it, keep saying
Violent Extremist.
Condition the marketplace. Yeah. Violent extremists, violent extremists, violent extremists. Get the book, get the book, get the book. Because wait a minute, because we also have to go on Amazon and tell people that you like the book. It's just like movies. When you try to sell a movie or sell great music, people will tell you, we don't want to hear R&B. We don't want to hear jazz. We don't want to hear European classical music, although they never tell you that, even though it doesn't sell the way these other forms of music sell. You've got to buy these books. You have to invest in subjects and in authors and in people who are investing in your welfare. All black folks are not our friends, and all white folks and Asian folks and Hispanic folks are not our enemies. We have to come together. And our brothers and sisters here have come. They have been studying white supremacy. What did you? Thank you for the correction. You said white nationalism. Stop trying to candy coat this thing. Why do we continue to go for the euphemism? Because nobody wants to talk about white supremacy. Why do we want to candy coat this? You're saying we're candy coating it. Come on, Dr. Mockaitis.
Conversation. Something occurred to me. You asked me before, where's the fear? And I've had this at my own university over difficult decisions, and it's a painful one. You say, well, white people are racist, that's threatening. But if you say, no, it's not that you're a bad person, it's that we are enmeshed in a culture in which there is systematic racism. It's not about you personally, it's not about you being good or bad, it's that from the very creation of the Republic, with all of its strengths and weaknesses, there is this institutional inequality that hurts all of us. And it's not a problem of one group. I totally like what you said. Everybody's involved. It's everybody's issue. It's everybody's problem. Drives me nuts during the debates when they go, we're going to talk about race. They go to Cory Booker or Kamala Harris. It's not just here. It's everybody's got to own this and address it. And when you make it that way, it maybe makes it a lot less personal and a lot less threatening. That we're all to some degrees enmeshed in this terrible system.
If I could just add, I think, and this is something I tell members in my community, in the Asian American community, because I have a lot of folks that say, well, I don't want to get political. It's gotten so contentious. I just want to, watch a sports game or something. It's just too much, right? And what I want them to understand is, if you don't help us address this issue, it's going to come to you, right? And the most political thing that, for folks that aren't used to being active, the most political thing they can do is just tell their story, right, to someone that doesn't know your experience, right? And so that maybe their eyes are open to a different way of looking. They don't make those false assumptions or have that fear of people they don't really know, right? That's extremely political, but it's also the foundation of organizing and how we make progress. And, the last thing I'll say is, for those of us here in Chicago, sometimes it feels like what's going on nationally is outside our control, right? But we can control what happens in this city. And to talk about systemic racism, we know this city has a long history of systemic racism, in particular to the west and south sides, right? And if we're against white supremacy, we have to be against anti-blackness, right? Which means we have to question everything. Why are we spending $95 million on a cop academy when the West Side has never gotten $95 million invested for jobs, for youth programs? Instead, it's closing schools, right? We should have those conversations more and be open about our history. And then let's collectively put our heads together and say, we want to change that, right? But Reverend Wilson said this, and it reminded me of the word repentance. We have to acknowledge the original sin. We can't just say, okay, we're going to start from now. We have to go back and acknowledge our history as a city. And we can model that for the rest of the nation. And so that's my hope for us here in Chicago and for those watching online.
I certainly can't follow that. I think it's interesting, about 80 years ago, there was a Swedish economist. Whenever Americans really needed to talk about race for real, they would often bring in a foreigner, which is kind of telling. Yeah. But there was a Swedish economist named Gunnar Myrdal who wrote a book called American Dilemma. And it's amazing how much in that book is totally dated, but also how much of it is totally current. And one of the things that Myrdal pointed out is that there's always been this internal contradiction where we believe in the American creed and the idea that the idea of democracy and equality and the ideals that we're so proud of in our country, and there's so many everyday ways that we violate that. And we have to somehow find a way to live with it. And ironically, racism was one of the ways that we came up with to live with that. Because if you're subordinating people and benefiting from their labor as slaves, how do you justify that within a democracy? You know, in ancient Greece, you could just say, hey, we won, you lost, we made you a slave. It's great to be me. You can't really do that in the United States. So you have to come up with a theory of racial inferiority as a way to justify exploitation. What's interesting in this current moment, where some of these issues have come back up in such an explicit way, is some unexpected people are lining up on both sides. There's people who are being very disappointing, and that you would have hoped that they would have stood up and said, no, it's not acceptable to question the birth certificate of the President of the United States. And there's other people who are actually quite conservative on a number of issues who say, no, it's actually, I'm not with the current state of things. There's people that George Will would be an example. Many people who say, I'm very conservative on all sorts of issues, on tax policy or foreign policy, whatever. I'm not conservative, or my version of conservatism includes anti-racism as a genuine value. And we have to be looking for the good people that we can draw connections to, who are sometimes not the people we expect, either because the people we expected aren't there and people we didn't expect are there. And it's an interesting time.
Don't you think that we need to, as we grow, and of course I'm bringing you into the conversation, Reverend Dr. Attorney Todd Yeary, aren't we all much more nuanced, much more multifaceted? You know, you find that African Americans are socially quite conservative. And so a lot of the conversations that we hear in the progressive community make us uncomfortable, because that's not where we are socially in church, and it doesn't make us anti anybody. It's just, this is what we were taught, this is what we believe, this is what we feel it works. And I think that we have to begin to give each other the space to talk and create a civil environment, and create the space for a George Will to come here and say, you know, I disagree with you about 99.9% of everything else, but on this I stand with you. That's one of the, Jackie Robinson, in his last memoir, I Never Had It Made. Can you imagine this American icon would write, he said, I never had it made, Jackie Robinson. He described what he saw would be Reverend Jackson's future. And Reverend, my father, preached Jackie Robinson's funeral. I think my father was 30. He was a kid. And he said, I see this young man, and Adam Clayton Powell said the same thing, I see him having a ministry of majestic proportions. He said, majestic proportions. He'll be able to reach across all ethnic and color and social and political and cultural lines, because that's really the future right? Is it, because don't we all have a dog in this fight? You know, I say to people, you know, these white families who are angry at these plantations, they say, you know, I'm a first generation American or second generation, or my family didn't have slaves, but I'm like, in for a penny and for a pound. Enslaved people built the country. So if you come here, you're in it. You decide to be part of the American project. You can't be 99% American, you gotta be 100%, right? Reverend Dr. Geary, as we look at the rise of white nationalism, and you all jump in at any point.
So it's a current rise. This is not new. Part of our challenge is we are not necessarily operating from the same reading of history. And so what we see going on in our politics is historical revisionism in real time. We rewrite and retell the story to suit our particular objective in that moment, whether or not it is grounded in fact. And so now you have a president where they actually track how many distortions and lies he has told since taking office. Now that would normally be a clue in and of itself. But you can't continue to tell those lies without enablers to protect the lie. And so now you've created a system of distortion which we call American history. So if we think about the founding and the framing of the Constitution was not built around this notion of an egalitarian ideal. It was a privileged document established for the economically elite, male, white landowner who had certain expectations of entitlement to the exclusion of all others. In order to reinforce the economic model of slavery, where in many southern states there were more enslaved people than there were free whites, they had to create a system of psychological and physical control, we call that terror, reinforced by law, slave codes, policing. Policing in the North was to protect property. Policing in the South was to keep bodies in certain spatial places. We've got to tell, if we can have these dialogues, but you're entitled to your own opinion, you're not entitled to your own facts. And so what we have gotten into is this notion that we have whitewashed the truth of American history at its anchor, and now we're trying to figure out how do we solve this problem. And I think Professor Whitman, James Whitman, wrote a book called Hitler's American Model. He actually proposes the notion that when the Third Reich was rising and the hostilities that we came to know as Nazi Germany, they actually studied American race law. So Hitler was not the monster. Remember, I tell folks all the time, Frankenstein was not the monster. Frankenstein was the doctor. The United States has become the physician that has created this model of racial entitlement that is now going across the world by way of replication because it has always been designed that way. The Second Amendment was not about a militia. The Second Amendment did not apply to black folk. Even though it was free or not, you could not own a weapon and be part of the militia. Why? Because that was a system of racial entitlement. And so if we're going to tell this story, one of the things that preaching requires is you got to at least make sure your historical context is right. Otherwise, you're going to distort the message and end up preaching something that is irrelevant and invalid at the same time. And that's the conversation that we continue to have. So I'm all good for how we get there, but when we sit down, white supremacy in and of itself as a system is a system of historical distortion that gets reinforced, that creates paranoia in the mind that allows folks to decide that they can do by whatever mechanism they think feasible, control the movement and the rights of somebody else simply on the basis of appearance.
Well, it's very interesting. Amen to that. It's very interesting as we close things out. Dr. Mockaitis, and don't you all leave this room because we got to raise a collection. And I'm going to have Reverend Dr. Geary help do this.
That's why you really wanted me to come up here. You wanted me to raise the offering.
No.
That's what.
Gotta help. We got to do that. But I appreciate your correcting us at the beginning of this conversation, Dr. Mockaitis. You said white nationalism, don't candy coat this. This is white supremacy. And thank you, Reverend Dr. Attorney Yeary. You're about to be an attorney, about to be sworn in as a lawyer in the state of Maryland. Amen. As we now have stories that are coming out, what a wonderful time it is to be alive. You have the Smithsonian magazines that are now talking about Nazi war prisoners who came here and who were appalled by the way black people were treated. They said, we're not even doing this to our Jewish community in Germany. Wow. I mean, they're saying that. That's been documented. When you look at apartheid, that was modeled upon Jim Crow. I mean, this is the poison that we've fed, but the good news is that everybody doesn't believe that this should continue. Amen? And so I'd like for you all to give me a quick minute or two, just a quick minute, so we can begin to wrap this up. But I didn't want, first of all, let us thank our panel today for being here. Come on, give them some love. And we hope that you know that you are home here at the Rainbow Push Coalition. We want you to come back because we have a lot of work to do. We have 33 million people who've been kicked off the voter rolls. And we have to figure out a way to inspire our young people and all people to get registered to vote, because they are estimating that President Trump could go right back into office having lost the vote by 5 million popular votes. I mean, Hillary already won. They keep looking for a Democrat who could beat Trump. We already had one. So, so let's, if you would, give a minute just to wrap this up, and I'll end up with you, Reverend Dr. Yeary, but I'm going to go right on down. Dr. Mockaitis, whose book is?
Violent Extremism.
There you go.
Anyway, the thing is, I'm 64. I'm in this fight for my 4 wonderful grandkids. I applaud this little girl who was so wonderful up here, that the future's yours. And I hope you live to a point where we don't have to keep having the conversation. But I take great hope in that future. I mean, look at the last couple of years, the Me Too movement, the Black Lives Matter movement, the women's movement. The president says, well, this is bigger than any march. And women who, anybody knows about oppression, right? As well as people of color, said, yeah, we'll take your dare, and they filled the streets. So I see great hope, as long as we all pull together, because I heard Nelson Mandela speak once before he died. He said, what unites us is so more powerful than what divides us.
First of all, I want to thank the Rainbow Push Coalition for having us here. Since you mentioned Nelson Mandela, one of my favorite quotes of all time is it's impossible until it's done, right? And I've been told in my work, in my community, so many times that something we were trying to do was impossible. And I know that this white supremacist threat that we're fighting, it's been since the beginning of our country. It's going to be here even after Donald Trump. And so we just have to stay vigilant. And what I can commit on behalf of my organization is that we're not just going to fight for telling, when someone is told to go back where they came from, or when they're made fun of because their English isn't good enough. We're going to fight for every community to be treated with dignity. And so long as we're all committed to that, we're going to win. We will win. So that's my message today.
Thank you also for having me today, and for the work that you do, and for the terrific panelists. I will buy your book. I would say this is a difficult time, but the clarity of this moment is bracing, and it's brought to the surface the fundamentals. And I think especially young people of every background, they get it. And the future is yours. And I think some of the unworthiness that we're seeing right now is a last gasp of some aspects of some traditions in America that we really have to defeat. And I'm feeling optimistic, although I'm also feeling very nervous about success is by no means assured, but I think it is likely.
We have all found ourselves trapped by the great lie. And the great lie is that whiteness is a thing. Identity is often shaped by attachment to land, language, and culture. So historically, we identified ourselves by who's your people. That's kind of what we say in the vernacular where I come from. Who are your people? That helped us to kind of know how we relate in terms of the strength of our diversity. Whiteness was actually crafted as a frame to be able to simplify categorizing groups of people around entitlement. And if you study the history of whiteness, when we talk about white supremacy, the government's policy on who can be white is not as clear as skin color. There are some people who are darker than me who are classified as white because of the political necessity to exclude them from certain political affiliations. And so when we talk about this, what really makes us who we are is being the best of who we are as a people. That's where the rainbow came from. It was tied to the best of who we are by geography, language, and culture. If we do that together and we get past this great lie that keeps all of us out of the entitlement conversations because the oligarchy is running the government now, if we can have that kind of conversation, I believe that's going to be the resistance and the revolution that we've all been seeking, and together we will be free.
Put your hands together for this panel, everybody.